we live? We're live! Hello, friends of the internet. Welcome to another Interstellar Book Club book discussion. It is for November, and we are discussing Kindred by Octavia Butler, which is super exciting. First, let's go around and introduce our co-hosts in case for some reason, this is your first time watching one of our book reviews. Hello, welcome. Consider following us on the Discord so you can talk with us and subscribe to all of the amazing people because we've been doing this over 4 years. Woo, we're so strong. Okay, so I can do this. Tina.
Hello, I'm Tina from Sound and Fury Book Reviews. I mainly do book reviews of sci-fi and fantasy and some horror. Yeah, my channel's wacky. I don't know. That's all I can say.
Tina's the super sci-fi person who's read all the sci-fi. If you have questions, go ask Tina.
Please don't. So I'm Natalie. I create bookish content on TikTok under Pastel Writer. I mostly review manga, romance, some fantasy, mostly read sci-fi for this book club. So I am not as well versed in the genre, but I'm here.
Yay! And we are missing one more co-host, Max, who couldn't make it with us today, but is here with us in spirit. And if you want to hear all of the amazing suggestions that Max usually has, which is why authors should hire him as to get suggestions, yes. Again, check it out in the Discord. Okay, so I think usually we try to keep things non-spoilery in the beginning. I feel like that's going to be really hard with me for this. I'll be so honest with you. I don't even know. But should I go ahead and try to give a general synopsis?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I'm going to try. So this is a story that is categorized as a science fiction because it has to do with time travel. More specifically, it's about a woman named Dana who is a woman who's about 26 years old in like 1975 or 76, and she is sent back to the antebellum South and doesn't know how she gets there. A lot of things happen. She has an ancestor who is there who she's like, oh, this is my white ancestor. What do I need to do to make sure that he stays alive so that I could be alive, right? But there's a lot of different things that happen there that talk about like generational trauma, the impact of slavery. Dana is a Black woman and she is married to a white man named Kevin. So chaos ensues when she gets sent back in time. And that is, I think, the best that I'm going to do as a non-spoilery summary. But something super important to know if you haven't read this is that it is classified as sci-fi, but it should not be classified mainly as sci-fi, specifically because I read in the back of this, it has like an interview with the author, and the author says herself that she didn't want this to be classified as a sci-fi because then people start to question the how instead of the why, and the why is more important, that it more accurately is like a grim, dark fantasy historical fiction. Was that good?
Yeah, yes. That was great. My copy doesn't have that note. That's not fair.
Yeah, it has like this whole like thing in the back.
I don't have that.
Yeah, I think I got like a school edition or something. I don't even know.
This is one of the only like time travel books that I've read where I did not question how it worked at all because it did not seem important. Actually, no, there's another one I read where I didn't really care, but I didn't even think about it in this one. It didn't seem like it was at the forefront of anything. So I agree that it shouldn't really be a sci-fi, but that's okay.
It's really good.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yay, we have people here. Hello. Thanks for coming.
Hi.
Oh, yay. Okay, you read this a few years ago. Awesome. Tell us what you thought about it, or if you ever plan on reading it. Also, I might join for a little while until my friend comes to visit. That's okay. Thanks for being here. Okay, so as usual, I think we kind of go around in the beginning and talk about ratings and general overall feelings about it. Is there anyone who wants to go first?
I can go, I guess. I would give this book 5 stars, hands down. So I read it in like 2 days. Like I read it 2 chunks. And after reading the first kind of half, I like couldn't sleep that night. I was too like
upset
Mm.
because a lot of stuff in it is upsetting. And but I think that it shows the power kind of her writing. I think she's a fantastic writer. I've read other of her sci-fi stuff before, like Dawn and things like that. And so yeah, I just yeah, I can't say anything negative about it at all, to be completely honest.
Cool.
There.
So Steph know this, but I'm sticking with my no rating of it. It's the type of read that for me, it honestly feels a lot like how I feel when I read nonfiction, which I don't like rating nonfiction. Like I feel like rating it is a disservice to what it's trying to accomplish. At least, again, that's just how I personally felt about it. But I thought it was incredible and very, very heavy. So positive things to say, but yeah, I'm at least choosing not to rate it personally.
Valid. All valid and real. Yeah. I gave it 5 stars. Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, Natalie, too, because like I also feel that way about memoirs sometimes. Like rating someone's life story feels weird, especially so something like this being so powerful feels in some ways like, yes, it is doing it a disservice. My thought process is I need the world to know that this is incredible, so I'm posting it 5 stars all over the internet. So yeah, like, oh my gosh, if something can make me cry not once, not twice, but 3 times, it's probably going to be an all-time favorite. So like, I was a hot mess. I thought it was really good, and it did a good job, and I wish I could talk about. Yay, we'll talk about it with us. Yay!
I've been telling, like, I told my husband the whole plot. Like, as I was going through it, I was like, so the first thing I said was the thing about Kevin. My brother-in-law's name is Kevin, so I couldn't think of anyone but him the whole book. And then I told all my friends at trivia about it. None of them were going to read it, but that's okay.
That's okay. Maybe they'll change their mind.
Spread the word.
So good. Okay. So yeah, no, same. Like I was sitting on the couch and my fiance was on, like, we have 2 couches, right? Like an L facing the TV. And I was sitting on one couch, he's sitting on the couch, and I'm just sitting there for 20 minutes sobbing as I'm reading the last of it. He's like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I'm great. I'm fine."
This is how book people like enjoy themselves, by like crying.
This is a good thing. Oh, a high school teacher in English made me read. Oh, that's great.
Ooh, nice.
Yes, nice. Good job, teacher. Good job. Okay, so at what point should I discuss what we're reading next month in case anybody doesn't want to stick around for us getting deeper into the book? Should I say it now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I feel like we should have a system by now, and yet every time I ask, like, what are we doing?
Last time we forgot till like the end.
So let me just say it now.
We were like off track for like 20 minutes.
So for anybody who wants to know what we're reading next month, in case you don't want to stay for too long, really briefly, next month we are reading Alif the Unseen by G. Willow Wilson. It is a sci-fi about a Middle Eastern Arab Indian hacker, and something goes wrong where they have to partner with somebody else to handle some situation with the prince. And it looks like a big government affair, and it has to do with like surveillance. But is there a speculative aspect of it? Because there might be like spirits and other things going on. That's what I'm getting from the synopsis. So it looks really good. Again, if you want to talk about it with us, check it out on Discord. Okay. Can I show you a picture of the cover? I can show you a picture, actually. That would be better than me just rambling at you about something that I don't really know. There it is, Alif the Unseen. Also that the author wrote the script for, is it Miss Marvel? Captain Marvel?
Oh, the comics. Yeah.
Yes.
I had looked it up when you mentioned it, and yeah, she wrote some of the comics for Miss Marvel. So.
Yeah. So, okay, cool beans. So here is what we're going to do now. Do we want to attempt to be non-spoilery? Because I don't know if I got it in me.
I don't know how we could talk about most of the stuff without spoiling stuff, because it's like so much depends on like the ending. And like
I feel like it's also closely tied together that I cannot like separate it.
Yeah, let's just jump in. Okay. So I'm just going to throw something out there and let's see what sticks. What's important about this book is that Dana doesn't have any control over the time travel aspect, right?
Mhm.
Whatever forces are at power here are forcing her into the past every time her white ancestor, something like 6, 7, 8 times removed generationally, whatever, it's like a 150-year gap about. He is a plantation owner, and every time that she is brought to his time, it is because he is close to death. He has gotten himself into some situation where it's like, if she doesn't save him, the question then becomes, does she cease to exist? And so what she's grappling with is how much of the horrible things that a plantation owning white man 150 years in the past in the antebellum South does she brush aside for the sake of saving her lineage, right? And there's like a lot of there's problems with that in the sense of how she chooses when to save him and how to save him and how involved to get. But also what he puts her through. Oh my God.
Rufus was a menace to society.
Yeah.
He was awful.
Not a good man.
He was awful.
He's terrible. And like, it was interesting. What I found interesting about him is that you could see how his upbringing, like little education, his dad's influence, the fact that his mom was not in the picture really, like she was there, but not really, didn't really listen, like didn't have any kind of, he didn't have any respect for her, how that kind of shaped him as a person. And you could see, because we see him in the different times of his life, how he didn't really change because there was no one there to like make him change. I just thought it was interesting, kind of like from a nature versus nurture perspective, how he was kind of raised into it and how that kind of stuff is like, you know, often like domestic abuse, it perpetuates itself. And I just thought that was really well done, how she showed that as well, that he wasn't just some like evil person. He was born into it and taught to be that way and was taught to be selfish. Right. If that makes sense. I don't know.
It does. Yeah. And that's like, that's part of the big problem, right? Is like there's these time gaps that happen where when she's in the present, she's only home for maybe a few hours, but it's been years in his time. So whatever good she might have done by trying to give him some sort of education or alternate perspective is completely undone in the time that she's gone. And it's like, if she had any influence over him when he was little, but by the time she gets to him as an adult, it's so cemented, the racism and everything else that his parents and that the world has taught him, that he needs to put himself on a pedestal because that's how slavery functions, right? Mm-hmm. And like it's beyond anything that she could do to change at that point.
And I think that's why she's so almost complacent at times. She's almost just like, what do I do? Like, how do I make this better? How do I not make it worse? And I think that's why sometimes when she doesn't act, it's frustrating, but it's like, she's almost like in the moment. How do I deal with this? Mm-hmm. I don't know if you guys saw that too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Where you grow up affects you. Absolutely. So yeah, Rufus was a lost cause from the beginning in my book.
Oh yeah.
That's how I felt from the start. And like Dana kept like trying to give him some slack, especially at first, because she meets him when he's just like a kid.
Yeah.
So she's like, there's still hope. And I'm like, he's a child, but already he has seen and taken in so much of this lifestyle that's completely entirely different from what it is in her timeline, which is 1976. Like, it's so different that there really was never any actual hope of her pushing him into like a gentler way of being. It was like, it was already there. It was kind of like slowly she just was gonna watch how it fully took over. Because of course, as a young child, he's not gonna be fully evil and horrible and whatever because he's a kid still. Yeah. But the mentality, though, is already starting to cement itself.
Yep. Yeah.
And I think, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say, I think that to further illustrate that point, which is something that I feel like Butler does so good in this book, is like there are scenes from beginning to end that everything is related to each other. I didn't feel like there was any moment in the book where I'm like, oh, why did we need this to be here? Like, no, even later on when we start to see children of the slaves who are enacting like the ways that they see the adults acting. It's showing and illustrating that this is all internalized at such a young age. So it's not just that he is being told that he is this thing. It's the way that everybody as a society works together that doesn't leave room for them to question whether it's something is wrong or right. It's like, no, this is just is. Like, why are you wearing pants? You're a woman. Why are you wearing pants? Like that in itself is just like, it keeps reiterating itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say one thing I really liked about what she did was how she had her little go bag with her all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, by the third time, I would have like, because she's in the States, I would have went and bought a gun and brought it back, like a 9mm. Like, what are they gonna do against that if they attack her?
No, that's a great question.
I don't know. I just
Like,
thought that. I'm like, why would you bring like a really high-tech weapon back?
Yeah, I don't know.
Be like, no one's getting to me. Like,
go ahead, Natalie.
Can't reload those muskets fast enough.
I think that goes back to like a big thing that at least I took out of it, especially because she kept going back and kept saving him, which is actually how difficult it is to harm another person.
Mm-hmm.
That's
like,
true. You're right.
If you're raised within a context where like, no, you don't hurt people. It's not part of your anything to really own a weapon, use a weapon, harm anyone in any way. It can be very difficult. And like we saw that early on when Dana went into the past and there was that white guy attacking her. And she was like, I should have like clawed out his eyes, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't find it in me to do that, because when you're not used to violence in that way, like that's not part of your life. It is like, sure, in theory, you're like, I should do this, but actually crossing that line of harming another person, much more killing someone else, is huge. And like the average person, it would take a lot to get them to kill someone else. Or at least that's my perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like our thought is like, oh my God, do whatever it takes to protect yourself, right? But that's part of her whole conundrum, is that in order to make sure that her lineage gets to where it needs to get to for her to exist, she has to keep making excuses as to why she can't even begin to rationalize violence against him. So that by the time that her only option is, okay, now I actually have to confront him and do the thing that I don't want to do, it takes so much in her. And I think that there's something really symbolic about it being something simplistic as a knife, versus, which is much more like in bodily contact, versus something that creates a kind of distance and dissonance between her and him.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I meant more like, as a, if she tried to escape up north or something, she would have it, not an enemy for her just going like,
right. Well, that's the thing too, right? It's like, we know that she can't leave, right? And it's like, so it's like, even if she did have all of these things, like, oh, if she had like a mace and a taser and all these other things, right? Who would she use it against? Because if she hurts any of the white people on the plantation, she's putting everybody else at risk, right? And then it could completely change the narrative of, well, she's like, well, I need to get my ancestors together, so I can't rock the boat too much while I'm here. How much do I get involved?
Yeah, that's true, because she could do, it's like she could do a small thing and it could actually have big repercussions against her ancestors.
Yeah, propaganda is everywhere. To find correct and wrong, even when you, it's like how it's fine to find correct and wrong, even when you need to. Yeah, it's really hard for her. What I loved about her character is that we get to see her making really hard decisions, and sometimes not making the right decision or not saying the right thing. But it's like, she is not just going back there as a modern woman, she's going back there as a slave. And what she's going through is yes, we have the modern sensibility of thinking like, oh, we know what's wrong and what's right. But when you're actually in that situation and you're being tortured and brainwashed and surrounded by people who question what you're thinking and what you know, I don't blame her. I can't be mad at her for the decisions that she made.
For sure.
Yeah. Tell me what you guys think. Okay. So do we want to talk about Kevin?
I know you guys don't like Kevin.
Let me censor myself.
Can I say one thing before you guys start? I
Go
think
ahead.
the reason I felt more benevolent towards Kevin at the start is because he reminded me of my brother-in-law, just because he has the same name. And I the whole time I was picturing him, and so I think that was like kind of shadowing for me.
That's
It's
fair.
so hard. I was trying to think of like other. I'm like, no, I just pictured him the whole time. I was like, yeah, in my head, Kevin.
That's fair.
So I'm not a Kevin defending.
We have Kevin bias.
No, I want to hear you guys' thoughts on Kevin.
Natalie, you look like you're ready to go off. Please.
Go for it.
Listen. Almost from beginning to end, I did not trust Kevin, and by the end, I could not stand him. I could not stand him. There was a good chunk of time that I hated Kevin more than Rufus.
Really? When?
Yes.
What part? What part?
Yes, because
I'm just so curious.
Like, arguably, both of them can be understood through the lens of the time that they live in. Like, I understand that, but I more firmly understand Rufus being awful because of when he grew up, his social class, his position as soon going to be inheriting this plantation that his father owns, all this stuff. I'm like, I understand him being awful. But Kevin, it's like, and Steph, you had mentioned it, he comes from a very like colorblind perspective that I'm like, how can you live your life with like these blinders on when you're married to like a Black woman? Like, I can understand having the blinders on if you're just a white man living in community with other white people, and sure, you might not inherently think that Black people are like inferior to you, like to the highest degree, but I can understand being more like, we're all the same, everything is fine, if you're living in that context. But I'm like, you married a Black woman, and at no point have you been like, these issues are very complex. And some of the comments that he makes, both in the memories that she has of him, of like the good times when they were getting together and all this stuff, and then during when he's in the antebellum South, and then when he comes back from the antebellum South, all of it, I'm like, you're horrible. You're horrible.
I have a theory about Kevin. I think the reason that he's like that and like has his blinders on and stuff is almost because he doesn't know anything about it. Because I think he grew up, so if it's in 76 and he's like, what, 35? So he grew up in like the 50s. And so were they teaching slavery like in school back then? Like, was he even surrounded by people that even talked about it? Like, I'm not defending him. I'm just curious. Cause like, I wonder, because like, for example, I know people like here in Canada, we have this terrible thing called the residential school system. And so it was where our Indigenous people were taken from their families as children and put in these terrible, awful schools, and kids died and stuff. It was awful. But I didn't learn about that in school until I was in university. And so someone who didn't go to university wouldn't know that history. And so I wonder if it's a similar kind of thing. Like Kevin, like I'm not saying he doesn't have an excuse to look into it because he married a Black woman. He should have done some research. But I wonder if he honestly just didn't know because he wasn't educated on it. And I think that might be kind of a theme of hers, is that, you know, education on these issues and making sure people know this history is like so important. And yeah, that's kind of I think I'm not trying to defend Kevin. I'm trying to say maybe that's what she's trying to say.
No, that's a great question.
I don't know. Like, I just think it's interesting.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think to illustrate that point, right? So a couple things. First off is that in the beginning of the book, we get, or not the beginning, somewhere in the first half, we get both of them talking about their families, right? And talking about how each other's families were not supportive of them marrying someone of the opposite race. Kevin's family saying, oh, why did you marry a Black woman? And her family saying, why did you marry a white man, and calling her a traitor? They're both saying, the words are the same, but the meaning is completely different. And we see that through the history that is ingrained in them, where his family is coming from it and saying, why did you marry her? Because they see her as inferior. And her family is saying, why did you marry him? Because of the history of pain that they carry, right?
Yeah.
And in the 1970s, at least from what I remember, is that biracial or multiracial or religious like marriages only became legal a few years before this book came out. So I feel like it's safe to say that one, this was like a hot topic at the time where I feel like a lot of people were divided on it as something that is so new. But also like I can definitely say that in thinking about what I know as an educator, it's not until very recently that textbooks and history books and what we teach in schools is starting to address, hey, Black history doesn't start with slavery, and that the textbooks are usually tend to be framed from like a Eurocentric view of history, right? And so while I would like to think that he didn't have, maybe he didn't have access to it because that would like liberate him in some way of doing that.
No, yeah, I was trying not try to do that. That's not what I was trying to say.
No, not you at all. I'm just saying like he definitely has access to it. It's just a matter of, is he willing to do the work?
Yeah.
And like Natalie said, what was concerning to me is like, how do they not have these conversations already? How are they in this relationship and it's not come up, right? So something about my experience. So I'm in a multiracial relationship, right? Like my partner is white and I'm Latina. And it's like, even just us, like I'm not a Black woman, but we experience things when we go out where it's like people will talk to him differently than they talk to me, right? So, and this is me being a light-skinned Latina. So I can only imagine what Dana must be going through being a Black woman married to a white man, especially in like a much less progressive time than we are now, because we're talking about like 50 years ago, right? So the idea that he hasn't done the work or that they haven't had any conversation is a red flag.
That's totally true.
Right?
I wonder if it would be interesting, like if say she was writing the book today, whether Kevin, like how Kevin would be. Like, would he be aware of this stuff? Like, would he also be shown as someone who isn't willing to get in the work? Like, I wonder. I'm just so curious. Like, too bad we can't ask her.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I don't know, Natalie, if you want to jump on that, but I feel like it's super important that he is framed the way that he is.
I mean,
that first?
I think so. I mean, part of my qualms with Kevin as well don't even really necessarily have to do as well. Like, it's not exclusively about the racial relations of it all. Some of it is that, for me, literally a lot of the things he does and says raise red flags for me of just like abuse, like potential abusive relationship in the making. Because I remember vividly, because I was like, what is going on here? One scene where like they're both writers, like Dana and Kevin are both writers. Kevin, and this is insinuated but not said straight up, is doing better financially and with publishing his work because he is a white man. And he gets annoyed with her, like seriously annoyed with her, when he's like, type up my stories for me. And she's like, no, I don't even like typing up my own shit. You want me to type your shit? And he's like genuinely affronted by that. Like, he's genuinely upset about it. And I'm like, what is wrong with you? And his whole response later, like when he comes back from the antebellum South, is very like, it put me off entirely. Like, it was very aggressive. Like, he clearly has that in him. Like, if he's upset, he's more likely to touch into like anger and put out his frustration in a way I don't like. And so ultimately, by the end, when it's just like, la, 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 they come back, Rufus is no longer amongst the living, and they just go and investigate stuff, and it's just left there as insinuated that they're just gonna be together, and that's that. I was like, I'm afraid like I'm genuinely like by the end I was genuinely afraid for her, and that she was not picking up the red flags of Kevin because she had been exposed to men like Rufus and men like Tom Whalen that were so extreme and blatant in their violence and their disrespect, not only for Black people but for women specifically as well, that she's just left with, no, that's what it means to basically not give a shit about someone. These other things are fine. It's okay. I can just be lenient. It's fine. And I'm like, that's how things snowball and eventually can progress into more concerning red flag obvious. So
Yeah.
that's why by the end I was like, I feel my spirit has been crushed because back in her timeline, so her present, and she's still with this man that I cannot stand.
Yeah, it definitely is concerning, especially so like to piggyback off what you were saying, right? When someone experiences some extreme abuse, extreme blatant racism or whatever the case may be, and that's considered the norm for them, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have the wherewithal to pick up more nuanced red flags or microaggressions, because it may not register as that, right? It's just like, oh, this isn't this thing, so it must be okay, but that's not that. And what's important about the ending, which is also what's it called, foreshadowed in the beginning, is when she loses her arm, right? All of that is to show, I think, just as much as we see with Kevin and his outbursts, that nobody comes out of this okay. Everybody carries that history with them. And for Kevin, he carries it, whether he's aware of it or not, by his color blindness. He carries it by his aggression. He carries it by the way that he talks to her, or the way that, he doesn't see things as an issue, or the things that he says when he's like, maybe I can make it here in this time. It's going to be fine, right?
Yeah, no, I forgot about that. Where he was all excited. He was like, ooh, I could basically follow history, so I could follow the trail of whatever. And I was like, what are you talking about?
I don't think he realized the extent of it though when he said that. That was like when they first arrived. I don't think I think it was a learning for him. I think like him having to be there for 8 years was a way for him to learn, and like learn the actual trauma that people went through, and like experience it himself to make him more of like an ally. But the problem is, like you said, he doesn't really seem to learn from it. We don't really get a conversation with them after about what his opinions or his thoughts about her, even, and her, and her, how she sees the world have changed. And I think you're right that he doesn't seem to want to reflect on that. And that is a red flag too.
Right. And because then that brings up the question as well, is like, he didn't stay in Maryland, one, to be there when she comes back, but which is like, to me, I'm like, hello, your wife, hi, she's coming back, where are you? You're gonna trust the 1915 mail system, USPS, to tell you your wife came back? Like, I don't even get my mail now sometimes. What are you talking about?
I thought he had to leave because they threatened him. I thought Whalen threatened him to get out, or am I thinking of something else?
I think there were like tensions. Natalie,
But
correct
he
me if I'm wrong.
could have
There were
stayed
some
closer,
tensions,
though.
but like, he didn't have to go to
that's
Boston.
True. That's true.
Okay. But he went somewhere where he himself would be safe to be able to do work to help people. And it's like, yes, he's helping people. Yes, he helped free slaves. Yes, all of that is great. But what did he internalize along the way? And what does that say about how he reflects his relationship with his Black wife and how that still lingers? Because was he doing it because he was like, I want to do the right thing, or was he doing it because it makes me feel good more so than actually helping these people? Does that make sense?
Like, he felt like he had to do it because, like, how am I gonna work? I don't know.
I think I follow.
Okay,
because it's like, are you doing it out of like an intrinsic desire to help people, and because you think again, in your heart and soul that it's important to help people? Or are you doing it for the gratification that you feel out of doing that? Because you know it's a good thing. So it's like, ooh, nice, I did this good thing. And I don't think the text directly tells us one way or another how he felt, but it could have been I'm one of the good guys. I came here and I was good. And he could have done it just for that gratification of like reinforcing in his mind, oh, I'm not bad like those other white people are. I'm good.
And that's how I felt personally about it. Like, that's how I felt because, again, the aggression that he has when he comes back. It's like, yes, they're home when they both come back to, what's it, 1976 or whatever. They're home for a few hours. But, like, she's spending her time comforting him. She just got whipped.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what do you mean? And then also, it's like, okay, yes, he went somewhere to help other people. But this whole thing is about making sure that your wife actually like exists. So maybe you want to help and make sure her family's good, you know, here so that she can exist to come back and save your ass. Like, I don't know.
I wonder if it was almost a comment, like a feminist comment on how women are expected to take on the emotional burdens of men a lot of the time and like help, even if they've both gone through something. The woman tends to be the one to expected to be like the caring one and the supportive one. And I think that might have been like almost like a very strong kind of nod to that, being like, look what she went through, but she's comforting this guy. And I think we're supposed to see her as, look how strong she is. But I think we're also supposed to see that, oh, she shouldn't have to do that. Like, why is she expected to do that?
Yeah.
So I think, I think
there's a lot of that in here.
Yeah, definitely a lot of that. And I think it just, interesting because she does that back in the past, but then she does it with Kevin. So it's like, how much has that changed over the centuries? This role that women are expected to have is nurturing and stuff. Like, I thought that was interesting. It was a smaller thread of the book, I think, but it was there. That's why she's so good. She's so good. Octavia Butler. I mean,
well, where we might, maybe something we could talk about where we see more of that is Rufus's mom.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Don't punch this lady.
What a piece of work that lady is. Oh my God.
Oh. I feel like I have so many things to say about her, but my anger is boiling. So if someone wants to take over.
I think go ahead. Go ahead. I like your rant.
I feel like a big thing that was being shown with her specifically was how a lack of education then makes you want to find control and empowerment by any means necessary. And like, she was awful because she's like, everyone here just thinks I'm a dumb woman, basically. But I'm going to show them it doesn't matter what you think. I have control and power over you. And I'm going to make your life hell.
And she has almost only a little bit more power than the enslaved people, because she, you know, her husband could beat her and no one would say anything. Like, her husband could sexually assault her. She couldn't say anything. Like, she had almost the same. And that's the thing. Like, she's acting out because that exactly like you said, she's putting this sense of lack of power. She's putting it on other people. And I hated her too. But
we get what's interesting is we get this kind of like view of the hierarchy within the plantation, right? Where we have Tom and we have Rufus and we have his wife, or maybe the guests, right? And then the slaves are like
Kevin and then his wife.
Kevin and then his wife, right? But I think one thing, like, aside from the anger that I felt, because I'm like, oh my God, this woman, but I also felt sadness in some way, because I'm like, what a waste of a life to just be subject to like being uneducated. And we saw that throughout everybody, right? We saw that with the way that Tom was so nervous when he first met Dana and saying to Kevin, like, oh, your slave is educated. That's dangerous, right? Like this constant sense of their ego coming out, especially when he was finding out that Rufus was learning to read better than him, right? Like this knowledge of knowing how little you know and knowing that knowledge is power, that for me was a really scary thing, but also a really sad thing. That's that's a good one.
That's a good one. No, I'm just like ruminating. I'm like, yeah, there's so much to unpack in this,
sad.
just that aspect of it.
It's so sad. Maybe we want to talk about a little bit, speaking of which, so like Dana's interactions with Rufus and how she always flips between this, like, I don't know if trust is the right word, but I kept annotating it as trust, like trusting that he's going to say or do the right thing, or trusting that he's going to make the right decision, and then kind of being surprised every time he doesn't. I don't know if anybody wants to like say anything about that, but that was a big point of tension for me.
It felt almost like an abusive relationship. Like she was trying to read his cues and hoping that he would not do the thing again that he did before, but he never changes. And I think that was kind of one aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that also comes in like literally like in a like similar to an abusive relationship where like he would try to mend things and be like nice and whatever to make up for what
he'd give her gifts. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
He'd give her gifts and stuff. But then ultimately the behavior would return, because a lot of it ultimately, like for him, it was like, why won't you just do the thing I want you to do? Like, if you just did everything I want, I wouldn't get mad. We'd get along just fine. I wouldn't have to do these things, which is completely like the mindset of an abusive person. Like, it's not, I don't have the onus of these actions. It's you. It's your behavior that's causing me to then have to do these things. And it's like,
yeah, it was so frustrating to watch, because you're like, and she knew it too. I think she knew it, but she didn't know how else to navigate the situation and the relationship, that she had to keep him alive, had to kind of stay with him to make sure that her legacy, or her ancestors, I guess she's the legacy, could continue. And it's like, it's so frustrating for her.
Yeah.
And terrifying.
And what was interesting for me to see with that too was that how that extended into the mentality of the slaves, right? How we would get this dynamic between different characters who would sometimes be like, well, if you didn't do that thing, if you just follow the rules, you would be fine, right? Or this internalized like dislike of each other in some senses as a survival tactic. Like we get one point where I think Dana runs away and she was like, how did they catch me? How did they know? And come to find out that someone else told on her, right? So this idea of like, we're stuck in this system. There's no way out. The best thing that we can do is play to the whims and kind of like internalize those abusive mindsets of saying like, well, if I lean into it, I did the right thing, therefore I'm going to be rewarded. But there is no reward in slavery. It's like either you're freed and we address the system that is the problem. There is no like, oh yes, I'm the favorite one, because they tried to give that to them. They tried to like, I think Tom Layton was giving them gifts when someone had a baby, and giving them little things here and there and being like, oh, look how good I am to you. But it's just brainwashing. All of it is just propaganda.
Yeah, and then the whole way that he uses the relationships the slaves have with each other as like leverage, like the fact that he sold Sarah's 2 babies and kept the one as like a threat that I'll get rid of her too. And I'm just like, this breaks my heart. Like I can't imagine like having your kids taken away and like so, I mean, I have 2 kids, right? So like it's like that part hits me the most whenever I hear about that. I just think it's so terrible, just awful. It just makes me so mad and sad at the same time.
Yeah, I cried.
I'm like trying not to cry now. Yeah, it was Sarah.
That was her name.
Yeah,
oh my god.
She was and her 2 kids were taken, and Carrie was her daughter. The one that couldn't speak.
And then that one guy, I forgot what his name was, but he didn't even really get to flirt with Dana. He just looked at her.
Sam or something, right? Sam, I think, right? Yeah.
I can't remember his name. Yeah.
I watched it a few days ago, so I'm pretty sure it was Sam. Yeah, and he just sold him because he looked at he talked to her for like 10 seconds.
It's just sad.
Crazy.
That was horrible. So it's a lot more complicated than I think than a lot of stories give it, like that nuance, and this book gives it all of that nuance. But yeah, so speaking of heartbreaks, when I think about Alice, okay.
Oh, we made the same noise. And the
It's
fact
like-
that Dana like convinced her to go to him at the one point, and I was just like, like, how do you? I tried to think of like what else would she say in this situation, I guess. Like what else would she, that would be a really hard position for Dana to be in, but then how guilty she felt probably giving her that advice.
Ugh,
Ugh.
it's
And then
horrible.
obviously the end result of
Yeah, part of me was thinking like, oh, maybe I would have been like, hey, you should name this baby Hagar, right? That sounds like a great name. That's a catchy name. It's in, like, but she just kind of let them go through it until it just kind of happened the way that it was supposed to happen, which makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's just, that goes into the complexity of Dana's character, of like the choices that she makes and seeing who pays for those choices.
How could she even talk to him after finding out that he raped her is beyond me. Like if I'd found out that a man I am talking to just did that to a woman, I don't know. I wouldn't like how could I even look at the guy? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's so
Yeah.
hard.
And that's our sensibilities now, right?
That's
But back
true.
then it was just like, why would you talk about that? That's not seen as, it's not illegal. It's not a thing that people address.
Like he wouldn't even understand if she tried to
Right.
explain to him why. She did try to explain to him why it was wrong, and he didn't understand at all.
Right. And then even more so the fact that he did it to a slave, which is not even, they're not even considered human. So it's like saying, oh, someone molested my pet, that's how they see them, that they're not people, they're property.
It's awful.
So yeah, I think about her and I heartbreak
the
most.
Sad.
I don't know.
So sad.
So yeah, what else do we want to talk about?
Can I ask this dumb question? So
Okay.
how did she lose her arm? Like, so she was hanging on to him, and then I was like, I tried to reread it. I'm like, what am I not getting here?
Yeah. Okay, so I found this super interesting, and I saw the foreshadowing happening earlier in the book, where when she would come back, she was never in the same place from when she left. She was always somewhere else.
I never noticed that.
So the first time she did it and Kevin was like, oh, you've been gone for 10 seconds. She just went to the other side of the room. And then there was another time where she came back and she was laying on the floor in her bedroom. Her head was in the bathroom door. So like her upper body was in the bathroom and the other half of her body was in the bedroom. And that's when I thought, oh no, what happens if she gets transported in a place that's not an empty space for her body to fit in? That's how the arm
I never picked up on that. That's why I was like, wait, why did her arm come off? And I was so confused. Thank you.
Yeah.
At least the way I also read it was that literally part of it was because he was holding on to her.
Yes.
Like that part of her, he was still holding on, and she could not bring him back with her under the conditions of whatever. Because obviously, again, like we had talked about before, like the sci-fi time travel element is not really important to understand fully how it works, but like she was able to bring Kevin with her over there, but Rufus at that point is dead.
Yeah.
Is of that time. We could theorize that because it's over, like there is no way for her to go back to that time. She also cannot bring him with her. And so in her coming back, inevitably what happened is what Steph said, like since part of her was being held down by something she could not take with her, then it stayed basically over there.
Got it. Okay.
That,
again,
that's how I read it.
Yep.
I couldn't tell you I'm right or wrong.
Yep. I love that. To me, that was just like a masterful way of illustrating that the trauma is still present. that no one comes out of this okay. Just because we are however many generations removed from like slavery being illegal does not mean that we are not still feeling the ramifications, right? And like we said earlier, we see it in Kevin and his aggression. We see it in him, in his words and his actions, but that everybody is affected by it. And in order to illustrate that it's still present in Dana as a modern day Black woman, she showed it physically, because you can see it in a white person by having their character say racist things, but she wanted to show that it is physically and many other ways affecting Dana as well. So I thought, I was just like,
yeah, she'll never not know that she doesn't have the arm. Like, it's not like
Mhm.
prosthetics in the 70s were very good. So, you know, like, she'll always have that.
Yeah. So, and then also with, I think her sister came at one point to talk to her and was like, is he hitting you? Was something going on?
Now that, I was like, how are you not telling her to get out of there? You know, like, if it was my sister and I thought that, and I saw that she was all beat up and I thought that it was one of their partners, like, I don't know what I would do, but I wouldn't just like go back home and never ask her about it until like 3 months later. But I guess, is it the time period? Like,
it is the time period. Yeah, it's the time period. It's like no fault divorce is relatively new. Like, women being able to get a divorce without the written consent of their husband is relatively new. And so like the idea of filing for domestic abuse in the 1970s,
especially probably as a Black woman too, probably like the cops probably didn't talk to her.
Yeah, they're gonna look at her first. Yeah, it's a lot. So yeah, oh my gosh, is there anything else we want to talk about? The heavy side.
I just think it's so good how we can still read this book 50 years later and it's still super, you know, it's not dry in terms of just the writing, topic and everything aside, how it's still so engaging and it's still like, it's so well written. It feels like it was written today. Like, I don't think there, other than like a few words here and there, it didn't feel like it was something that was written in the 70s. Like, I've read lots of books from the 70s. I read the classic sci-fi all the time, and some of them are so incredibly dry and like the prose is very dated, the dialogue's like kind of stilted, but no, hers is so like, it feels so modern still, even though it was set and written 50 years ago. I just think that's so amazing.
Yeah. One thing I definitely took out of this being my first Octavia Butler read is advice that I want to give to many other authors, which is like, take out all the fluff, make it short, make it sweet, make every moment count. I don't need all that extra stuff. Like, just say the thing, do the thing. And also it's like two things, two sides of a coin of a thought, which is like, oh my God, this book is so important. Everybody needs to read it. But also a sadness for me and the thought of, unfortunately, the historical impact of these times is still very present. And so I'm sad to say we still need to read this because we have so much work to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
Like, it's good, read it, but also it's bad that we have to read it, but you have to read it because it's bad that we have to read it, so read it.
Because I took an American history class in university, and so we read Twain, and we read, as I was telling Steph earlier, I can't remember his name again. Frederick Douglass.
Frederick Douglass, yeah.
So I read like his stuff. So a lot of the focus was on that time period, and so I was like lucky to have that background going into this, like as a Canadian. And so I just, where was I going with this? Oh, how did I start this conversation?
Brain fart.
It's Sunday morning. I think it would be like, this should be a book that's taught in schools. I think it should be to give people that, you know, a more approachable way to learn about the time period that hopefully spurs them to learn like the history too behind it.
This is why we need to fight book bans. Let's go. Okay.
I can't believe what's happening to you guys with all the book banning.
Even more important, read it.
Yeah.
No. Okay. So I don't know if there's anything else specifically that I can think off the top of my head to like talk about right now. I have a feeling after we're done, I'm going to be in the chat like blah, 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 blah. I don't know what else to say right now. Other than iconic.
Agreed.
Hi, Roro.
Hi, Roro.
Hi. We're actually wrapping up right now. So, but if you've read it, drop a comment, whatever, you know where to find us. Okay. Should we wrap it up?
I
Yeah.
think so.
Sounds good. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching another book club review. We like to hop around on channels and do stuff. And if you want to chat with us, everything you need is in the description. And we will see you next month for A Leaf Unseen by G. Willow Wilson. Okay. All right. Bye, everybody. See ya.